Okay, I think we can now begin. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you are joining us. We're honored to have with us today at this special Algemeiner event, Arthur Langerman. Arthur lives in Brussels, in Belgium, but he's actually joining us today from Berlin in Germany, where he is attending a meeting of his foundation, a foundation that is dedicated to educating the public about the visual anti-Semitism, the expression of anti-Semitism in visual form that is contained in his extraordinary collection of more than 10,000 items of what the collectors call Antisemitica, posters, paintings, and other objects that are imbued with anti-Semitic stereotypes. And some of you will have seen that we at the Algemeiner published an extensive interview that I did with Arthur last month, where we published some of the images of the collection in a gallery at the top of the piece. So Arthur, thank you for joining us. Welcome. We're really pleased to have you here. Can I ask you to begin by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you came to start this collection?
Yes, I was born August 21 in Antwerp, Belgium. It was the moment in 42. It was the moment where there were the big razzia in Antwerp. And I always wonder how I could survive this period. My parents took me from one place to another. So we hid during two more years. And my mother in 44 met a guy, a friend working for the Red Cross, and he asked her, "Do you want that I give you presents for your baby son?" So she said yes, and he took her address. This person was arrested by the Gestapo, and they took his address book. And 28th of March, 1944, almost the end of the war, my parents were arrested. They were sent to Mechelen. Mechelen is a town between Antwerp and Brussels, where they were putting the Jews before sending them to Auschwitz. They stayed there during 3 months. They sent me to Brussels in a foster house for babies. So I was already prisoner of the Germans when I was 1.5 years. And in this foster house, there were babies from 1 year till 2 years. And so I stayed there during one year, even a little more. And my parents were sent to Auschwitz. You can imagine the stress they had. A baby sent in a foster house. They didn't even know where I was. They knew one thing, that I was taken from them. So they were put in these trains, for animals, and they after 2.5 days of travel, they arrived in Auschwitz. They arrived in Auschwitz. They were separated, and one of the things that my mother told me later was they had to pass in front of the officer, probably Mengele, who said, "You go left, you go right." And when she passed, he looked at her and said, "You go left." And then he looked at her once more. He said, "No, go right." And this is the difference between living and dying. So my father was sent in the men's part of the camp, and she was sent in the woman's part. So my father didn't come back, and my mother came back in 45, in May 45. But as all the people who came back from concentration camp, she didn't want to speak about what happened to her. And I was too little to ask her questions. I respected her wish to be silent. So during all these years, she didn't speak about my father, my grandparents. I had about 25 people who were sent to Auschwitz from Belgium. I never knew grandparents or aunts or uncles. We are very, very small family. We are left with 4 people. So she didn't speak, and I respected that. And during many years, you know, as a young man, I was busy with my things. I started to work in the diamond business and trying to get some money. At 15, I had to go and work to help my parents, my mother to get some money, some finances. And then in 61, there was the Eichmann trial, and I followed it I was very interested. And
Arthur, if I could just say, just to clarify, that the trial you're referring to was the trial in Israel of the Nazi officer Adolf Eichmann, who was captured, who was one of the key architects of the final solution, and who was seized by Israeli agents in Buenos Aires in 1961 and spirited to Jerusalem, where he went on trial. Just in case anybody's not familiar with that reference, but Arthur, do continue.
Yeah, so I followed his trial. It was really very interesting for me, because through him and through all the witnesses that passed in this trial, I learned what happened actually to my family, how they were murdered in a horrible way in Auschwitz, how 6 million Jews were killed in a horrible way in Auschwitz, and how 1.5 million children died in disgusting way there. So a big question that I was asking to myself always is, what did the Jew do so bad to be punished in such a way? And I'm a collector as a nature. You know, a collector is a special person. It's actually a sick person, because he wants to put all his energy in collecting things that he doesn't need. So I was collecting all kind of books and stamps and potteries and whatever I could collect, I collected. So I was used to go to flea markets, to paper markets and everything. And there, slowly, I saw pictures describing Jews like horrible people, and it's with caricatures, and there were posters and paintings showing the Jews on the most horrible way it could. And then I was really interested to see. To find more. As a collector, I started to be interested in this subject, and I started to collect, and it lasted 60 years, and even till now, I collected more than 10,000 pieces that has only to do with visual anti-Semitism. So it's they show the Jews in all the countries in Europe. In the most horrible and disgusting way, comparing them to rats, to ants, to spiders, to show that we don't need them and we have to destroy them. So my research sent me to all the countries in Europe to buy anti-Semitic posters. I went to France, where this started in the beginning of 1900 with the trial of Alfred Dreyfus, and there was France was divided into two people. The people that were interested in, they were defending the Jews, and the other one that they were attacking the Jews. Dreyfus. Perhaps you can tell a few words about him historically, Ben?
Well, yes, of course. Dreyfus, Captain Alfred Dreyfus, was an officer in the French army who was framed at a trial in 1894 of having surreptitiously provided the Germans with key French military intelligence. And in fact, as was later revealed, Dreyfus was set up by a group of non-Jewish officers in the French army. But the significance, I think, of the Dreyfus trial for our purposes was that it was a seminal event in modern anti-Semitism. It split France down the middle. You had the people that lambasted Dreyfus, and then you had, of course, the Dreyfusards, the supporters of Dreyfus, people like the novelist Émile Zola and others rose to his defense and saw this really as a profound test for French civilization. But of course, the significance of the Dreyfus trial is that it came about just under half a century before the Holocaust, and many of the themes that the Nazis deployed against Jews, particularly this idea of sinister Jewish control of the media, of the economy, of Jews as more loyal to each other and to their tribe than they are to the countries of which they are citizens. All of these themes came out during the Dreyfus trial.
So, here in Europe, people in every country, they said, we don't have anti-Semites in our country. But I was searching and I was finding images that came from all the countries here in Europe, from France, mainly from France. There is a lot of drawings, anti-Semitic drawings. Then you have Germany. Germany is the biggest producer because of the war. You have all the Eastern countries, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Slovenia, all these countries, Romania, Hungary. They have a lot of anti-Semitic drawings, and there were a lot of anti-Semites there in these countries during the war, and this is a little bit of my story and the story of the collection.
So I think this is a good point as any to start looking at some of the images in your collection, and Arthur, to have you as our expert guide take us through them. I just want to point out to those of you who want to ask questions, you can do so. We will have a Q&A at the end of this event. And if you go down to the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll be able to submit a question there. Also, let me just encourage all of you here today, please, to keep in touch with us at the Algemeiner. We love hearing from you. And if you want to contact us by email, you can do so at donate@theaj.com. That is donate@theaj.com. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now. What I want to do now is to show some of these images. I'm sorry. Can Arthur? Sorry. Can somebody tell me, are these images appearing?
Not for the moment.
Okay. I'm so sorry. Hold on just one second.
Something.
Okay. Now we have them. I'm sorry about that, everybody. Okay. So
this is a newspaper that is called Der Stürmer. Stürmer started to be printed in 1925 till the end of the war, and the biggest person that makes caricatures is his name was Phipps. You can see on this image on the right side up, you see signature Phipps. That means Philipp Rupprecht. It's written here in German, das Lügenmanöver. So this is a liar, this is a Jew, and you see on they were mixing everything to accuse the Jew. On the one side, you have the Freemason. On the other side, you have the communist. On his forehead, you have the Jewish star, and he's eating the world. He wants to grab eating the world. And underneath it's written, die Juden sind unser Unglück. The Jews are unfortunate. So this was written on every paper from der Sturmer. Every week during more than 20 years, this magazine came out and was exposed in the villages, out in special cases that everyone in town could read it. It's a magazine that is only written. It's only written about how bad and ugly the Jews are.
And Arthur, I remember when I interviewed you, that one of the points that you emphasized was that these images in some ways were the foundation for the Holocaust. If we hadn't had at least a century, as your collection shows, actually much more than a century, a stream of anti-Semitic images, then the environment, the conditions for the Holocaust may not have been possible. And I thought of that point when you raised the tagline that the Sturmer used, that the Jews are our misfortune. That, in fact, of course, was not a Nazi slogan. It's actually attributed to a German historian called von Treitschke, and I think that comes from the 19th century. So all of these images that the Nazis were aggressively promoting, they have a much longer lineage,
absolutely. I was always wondering, how is it possible that the German on every country were the meanest, and they killed the people in such horrible way? Why the Germans? They have poets, they have musicians, they have artists, they have they are people with a lot of feeling. How is it possible that the whole, I would say 98% of the country were admiring the Nazis? So because they got these images, this message, since 50 years, they got it in their heads. And every day people were showing the Jew in a horrible way. And at the end, they wanted to kill them. I just wrote a book about a group of German policemen that went after the Wehrmacht came in Poland. They came after them and to kill Jews. This was what they had to do, and these policemen were normal policemen, normal people, and they received the order to bring the Jews in the woods and to kill them one by one with a gun. They opened pits where they had to be buried, and they killed 500 from these policemen. They came in, and it was the Einsatzgruppe that came in Poland. They killed 70,000 people. But in Poland, there was about 1.5 million Jews that were killed in this way. And these, you would imagine that these soldiers, these Einsatzgruppe, were obliged to kill the Jews. No, it's not true, because there was, on the 500, there were 10 people that refused to do the killing, and they weren't punished. They weren't even sent to another to the war. They could stay there and not kill them. And the other, there was some started to kill and were disgusted and stopped to kill, but most of them got a pleasure in killing. And after the war, these horrible monsters came back to their life in Hamburg, and they lived normally as nothing was happening. But they killed thousands of Jews in the most horrible way.
So moving on a bit, Arthur, to some of the next images. There we have, obviously, the Stürmer is emblematic of the Nazi period, and no publication, in a sense, I think, represents the Holocaust in the way that the Stürmer does. But the next image, I believe, is from Poland in the 19th century, and we've chosen to show this because it's very clear that you can see, admittedly, in an oil painting, many of the themes about physiognomy of Jews as understood by anti-Semites. You know, slide questions.
This is a Polish painting from 1891, showing an imaginary Jew in the I know a lot of Jews. I don't know one single that is approaching to this physical thing. His nose, his eyes, he's so mean. He has canes under his arm. He's selling canes. So the caricature is not actually an exaggeration of the reality, but it's the invention of the reality. They invented a Jew that is as horrible possible, that everyone could be disgusted. And this is a painting, and I've always wondered who would put a painting like this in a salon, in its living room. It's I don't know. Did you ever
find an answer?
Huh?
Did you ever find an answer to that question?
No, I did not. And you want to know what? It's hanging in my office. So
okay. All right. So that provides us with some sort of historical grounding for these images. The next image, again, I believe this is from Serbia, and the timing, of course, is the Second World War. What you see here is a stereotypical Jewish elder, if you like, operating both Joseph Stalin and Winston Churchill as marionettes. And clearly the message here is that the war against Nazi Germany is a Jewish war, and that, of course, was Adolf Hitler's message. But Arthur, tell us something a little bit about this.
Well, in every country, the Germans arrived. Here they arrived in Serbia, and they made posters for the Serbian population. When they arrived in Romania, they made posters for the Romanian population, and in Poland they made posters for the Polish population in the language of the country to show how ugly the Jews are. And here they saw a Jew who is at the time Freemason, Jew, pro-Russian. You see all the images there on the curtain. He's representing death. You see the death head over his head, and he's playing with Stalin and Churchill. That means that actually he is directing the policy of the world, and it's like the legend of the Jew that is dominating the world and playing with everyone. This is also happening today. If you open the media, you see that the Jews organized this COVID thing. That is a Jew who found out the medicine of against COVID. So the idea since then stays the same today.
Yes, and you know, it stays the same today, and that I want to move on to the next image that we have here, because of course these ideas about Jewish power have manifested in the Middle East in the context of Israel and Israel's conflict with the Palestinians. And the image that we see here is a very interesting one. It fuses both visceral anti-Zionism with very crude anti-Semitism. So what you're seeing here are the cannons of the Arab League's armies aimed at this person who represents this caricature, who represents the state of Israel, and who, of course, is being driven back into the sea. That was one of the goals of the Arab League in 1948, was to drive the Jews into the sea, and that's what's happening here. But what I think is striking, Arthur, and maybe you could say a bit more about this, is the fact that if we examine the caricature that is here, that this man that is supposed to represent the state of Israel, we see all the themes in the previous images: the hook nose, the sort of the fat stomach, the notion that this person is essentially a coward when confronted with real force. You know, and this is clearly something that seeped into the Arab world, Arthur.
Yeah, it's, you know, the hooked nose is also a legend. I read a study about the nose, analyzing how many Jews have a big hooked nose, and they came on the result of 16% of the Jewish population has a hooked nose. And then they made the same analysis about the non-Jews, and they came over the same result, 16%. Although I was in Armenia last year, and there I saw the biggest nose I ever saw in my life. So, you know, this is a legend, a history about the Jew, to show it represents the Jew. You show a big nose. Why? Because there was a painting in the 11th century where they saw the Christ being crucified. All apostles are around him, and one is turning the back of him. It was Judah, and this Judah had a big nose like this. And since then, the legend of the big nose remains.
Right, right. And moving on here, I want to shift focus slightly to two images from the 1930s. This one from the United States, and this one from the Netherlands. And what both of these images show is the fixation that anti-Semites had in the 20th century with the notion that Jews were promoting both capitalism and communism simultaneously. That capitalism and communism in a way came together in the body and the activities of the Jews. And what we see here in this slide that you should see on your screens now, this is an example of American anti-Semitism from the 1930s, specifically 1935, and it shows a spider. Jews are often represented in anti-Semitic imagery as spiders because spiders have 8 tentacles, and these multiple tentacles get into multiple places: banking, the media, government, the military. You can blame all of this. There's a Jewish tentacle in every one of these, according to the anti-Semite. And you see that the Jewish spider has enveloped the American eagle in its web, while the snake of Bolshevism, which is also Jewish, is threatening to poison, to bite and to poison the eagle. And of course, that slogan, which I can read because it's in English, Gentiles organize, unite, and fight Jewish communism. But then what happens in the next slide is we see an archetype of a Jewish capitalist on a booklet that comes from the Netherlands titled "The Jews in the Netherlands." And here you see a very content, portly Jewish businessman looking very pleased with himself.
Yeah, but you have to see here, he's coming from the very small part of this image shows him when he comes from Poland with nothing, only a bag, nothing to wear. And then he becomes slowly, he becomes bigger and is a bourgeois. You see, with his attaché case, he's probably starting a business, and then he became the rich man with medals, cigars, and everything. So everywhere they show the Jew that came poor and that finished very rich, and this is in all the countries. Is here in Netherlands, it is in France, it is in Poland, it is in Russia. the pattern is always the same.
Right. Now, the next two images, again, are more historical ones. This is an example, I believe, from Belgium in the 18th century. And what it shows is a group of Jews, I believe, Arthur, invading a church, a Catholic church, and stabbing the communion wafers. The communion biscuit, the biscuits that are given to worshippers during communion. In the Catholic faith, of course, the wafer represents the body of Christ. And the idea, I think, Arthur, as you explained it to me here, is that by stabbing these wafers, the Jews again puncture the body of Christ and draw
killing Jews, are killing Jesus another time. And the legend said that when they stab these wafers, they start to bleed. And so Jesus was bleeding one more time. And after this legend, again, they about 25 Jews were condemned to death, and they had to be burned in the middle of the town.
Right. So we see there the very clear relationship between anti-Jewish agitation in the form of these images and the very real violence that is visited upon Jews in the aftermath.
Yeah, but here they show well that the Catholic Church was one of the big providers of anti-Semitism, because since 2000 years, they were chasing Jews everywhere, in every country, killing them. There are, if you look at the history since the first centuries, the Jews are persecuted because of the legend that they helped killing the Christ.
Right, and yes, you know, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, Arthur, is we have the impression that Nazi anti-Semitism, it's a very conventional interpretation that the anti-Semitism of the Nazis was different from traditional Christian anti-Semitism, that the Nazis essentially made anti-Semitism into a modern and secular ideology. But actually, looking at your collection, I do see that many of the themes of Christian anti-Semitism emerge again in Nazi anti-Semitism.
Yeah, absolutely. But the Hitler and Goebbels had a cult. They wanted to kill all the Jews in Europe, everywhere where they would find them. They used to say, if we don't kill them, they will kill us. Like the small proportion. There were 400,000 Jews in Germany during the war, and 70 million Germans. That's a very small proportion of people, and they were afraid that the Jews would kill the Germans. This was the leitmotif of all the speeches of Goebbels and of Hitler. And they took anti-Semitism wherever they could find, in the church, in the history, and always the fault was the Jews.
So let me just remind all of you watching our fascinating discussion here with Arthur Langerman. We are taking questions. We'll be going to questions in about 10 minutes. And if you have a question that you'd like to submit, please hit the Q&A button on your Zoom screen and submit your question there. Again, just to going through some of these images, here we have another oil painting of three rather sinister, ugly-looking Jews, Arthur, and again, this seems to have been quite. It's a recurring theme in your collection: oil paintings that show these rather grotesque depictions of Jews.
Yeah, it's again, you see, they invented an ugly Jew, an ugly person that is disgusting, and who would hang this in his living room? This is the question I'm asking again. It's they show three Jews, and they put them in the most horrible situation. Look how they are ugly. I would be afraid if I meet these three people in the streets. It's really the painting is interesting and it's well painted, but what it shows is ugly.
And Arthur, how are you aware how widespread were these images? How, you know, if I'm walking into a living room in Berlin or Marseille in the 1880s or the 1890s, how frequently am I going to encounter portraits?
I have about 150 paintings like this, similar to this, in my collection. Some like this, some lighter, some funny, some not funny, but I have about 150. If I put them one against the other, you would be afraid to see what it represents.
So now I want to the next two images I've selected because I think they speak to an event that we at the Algemeiner covered in our news coverage recently, and that was the attack on the Ukrainian president Volodymyr Zelensky. The attack launched on him, verbal attack, I should say, by the right-wing American talk show host Tucker Carlson. Carlson referred to Zelensky, who, as I said, is a Jew and a proudly identifying Jew, both as a rat, as a persecutor of Christians, and as a rat. Two very clear anti-Semitic dog whistles. The persecutor of Christians theme we've seen in some of these images already, Arthur. But what we see here in this image is the image of the Jew as a rodent, as a rat. In this example of Nazi propaganda published in the Russian language during the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union.
You can see it's a Nazi propaganda when you turn this image. Can you turn this image?
Yes.
Yeah, you see on the bottom, you see the Nazi eagle, and it's written in Russian Krasnoye Armee. It's the Red Army, and so if you twist it, they show again that the enemy is the rat. We have to catch the rat and we have to kill him. Židi, kak, krisi. Oh, I'm not very good in Russian.
Right, but I think none of us need to be readers of the Cyrillic alphabet to know what this image is communicating. And clearly, this is an unambiguous exhortation to kill Jews, isn't it, Arthur? Because that's what we do.
It's ruining the country. So we have, and this is why in Russia and in Poland and in Ukraine, the Ukrainian were the best helpers from the Germans, from the Nazis during the war. They had the Nazis when they came in Poland and in all these countries, they were helped by Lithuanians, Latvians, and Ukrainian. These people were even more horrible than the Nazis. This is why when you speak about the war, Ukrainian, Russian now, honestly, I do not pity the Ukrainian. What they did to the Jews during the war was so horrible, was much more horrible than what the Germans did. And what the Germans did is so disgusting. So this is what the Ukrainian did.
Now, again, from the same era, one of the more sinister and insidious aspects of Nazi propaganda and Nazi anti-Semitic propaganda was the way that it targeted children. And here we have an example of an illustration from a German book published in the 1930s, warning children to stay away from Jews. And as you see, we have here again the stereotype that we've seen in so many of the other images in your collection, Arthur.
Yeah. This was a book that Julius Streicher, the editor of Der Stürmer, was showing in the schools, and it's all drawings by Phipps again, Philipp Ruprecht. He in this book, it's called the Poisonous Mushroom, and it's a mother who explains to her son, German son, listen, when you go and get mushrooms in the woods, you have some good ones and you have some bad ones, even if they look alike, if they are the same. And they, as an example, then in the whole book, they show, they make a comparison about the Jew and the non-Jews. And here in this image, they say to the two children there, take care, don't approach a person that looks like this and would give you some candies. You see, the Jew again, with this ugly, disgusting aspect. It's always the same reference with the big nose, the big belly, the big cheek, the ugly representation. And they say, don't approach a person like this.
And of course, the additional notion that the Jews are murderers of children. This is an old idea with the blood libel.
Yeah.
And one assumes that part of what Streicher was trying to achieve here, excuse me, was to revive that idea of Jews as child killers.
Absolutely.
Okay, so moving on, I do want to take some questions, and we are getting on. So I'm just going to briefly talk through some of the rest of these. This is an image, I believe, from a
Czechian painting that's called Relling.
Yeah,
Relling, and he was analyzing the Talmud. He made about 30 images like this, more ugly one than the other. He was analyzing the Talmud, saying that the Jews have the right, according to the Talmud, to harm the non-Jews, to kill them, to steal them, to do everything. So he analyzed and shows the Jews like an eagle. This one is really an ugly image. And this Relling is suicide in 45. At the end of the war. So he made a whole book around the Talmud and the Jews.
And finally, I did want to save a little bit of time to talk about this image. Those of you who read the interview with Arthur will know that we at the Algemeiner published this image very, very prominently. It's a postcard that was sent from place called Marienbad, which is now, the time was part of what is now Germany, but is now in the Czech Republic. And Marienbad was a spa town where wealthy Europeans in the 19th century would go to take the waters and do the spa treatments that they did back then. What's significant about, well, I'm going to get Arthur to talk a little bit about the image on here. What I want to just highlight is that the message accompanying the postcard. And this is actually a postcard sent to a fellow named Conrad from a friend of his called Ernst Bergman. And Bergman says in the first paragraph of this postcard that he and his wife are having a very nice time in Marienbad, and that the treatments are working well, but that the weather is awful. It's cold and damp, despite the fact that it's July. But even worse, he says, is the profusion of the types of people that you can see on the front of this postcard. So Arthur, over to you. Tell us about these three individuals on this postcard.
Yeah, so these three individuals, I have to say again, the same thing. They all have the hat, the umbrella, they are ugly. They are real ugly when you see them, but and in every image that I have hundreds of images from Marienbad, in every image you see them in a most awful way. Usually they show them going to toilet, because in Marienbad there's water. You drink this water and you have to run all the time to toilet. So they show these ugly Jews running to the toilet, and this is the big laugh these images. But the subject is, as you said, the people were complaining that there were too many Jews there, and right. they wanted to avoid them. So this is one. There was Marienbad and there was Karlsbad, two places where the people still today can go and have baths and drink water and go to the toilets.
And moving on now to the last image that I want to show, which is an image from France during the period of the Dreyfus trial. So I believe this poster dates back to the 1890s. And the person shown in the middle, the fellow with the eye patch, is not in fact Dreyfus, but a member of the Jewish Rothschild banking dynasty. And again, of course, Rothschild is a word that we hear, is a name that we hear constantly invoked today, whether the conspiracy theory is COVID or the denial of the Holocaust or Israel's supposed influence over American media. You find the fingers of the Rothschilds in all of these pies, according to anti-Semites. And here is a very interesting and early example of the demonization of the Rothschild clan as bearers of this sinister Jewish power.
Yeah, and so he's like an octopus. He wants to take everything in every of his hands. And here downstairs it's written, Le Roi des Porcs, the king of the pigs. And the king of the pigs is another image. It's the image from Zola. And where you see Zola, he is dressed like a pig, and he paints with shit on the wall. He makes shit from France. So you have 52 images like this. One is more horrible than the other one, and these were all defenders of Dreyfus. And it's written Le Musée des Horreurs, the Museum of Horror.
Right. That was a pithy but very disturbing explanation that you just provided us, Arthur, of this image. I want to we have about 10 minutes left, so I would like to go to some questions here. The first question I've got is, Arthur, in which cities were you finding these anti-Semitic artifacts in
So I found in France a lot, in Germany, in the remote remote little towns, and where there were fairs, and I went to the bookshops and looking if I could find something. I found them in Czechia, I found them in Romania, in every city where I was. But funny enough, the most anti-Semitic countries here in Europe is Spain, Portugal, and Ireland. And I didn't find any of these anti-Semitic images in these countries. Probably Spain and Portugal, because the Jews were not there since 1500. And Ireland, I didn't find it's the most pro-Palestinian country at the moment. I also didn't find anything in Switzerland, but they had a mild approach of the anti-Semitism.
Arthur, so I have an interesting question here from Mark Zaid. Mark tells us that his grandfather was an American rabbi with the US forces who liberated the Dachau concentration camp. But even more pertinently, he is, like you, a collector. He says mostly of legal matters related to anti-Semitism, such as the Dreyfus affair and Nuremberg prosecutions. So his question, Arthur, as a fellow collector, I know we view our items sometimes as our children, and this makes for a difficult question, but what to you is the most important or rarest piece that you have obtained?
The rarest piece? I have many rare pieces. I have one who was one of the first image that I bought. It's a religious Jews sodomizing a child while reading the Bible. So I think this is one of the most horrible images that I found.
Right, and I have to say, we also saw that image, and we decided that it was too upsetting to
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
And I think again, Arthur, one of the questions that we're getting repeatedly is, what are you planning to do? What is the future going to be of this collection? There's talk of a museum of anti-Semitism.
I collected these pieces during 60 years, not even daring to speak about to my family, because every time I showed some images that I bought, they said, you are totally insane, you are crazy, collecting, as a Jew, collecting these awful things. I didn't dare to show them to my friends. But when I became around 70, I said it's time to do something with this collection. And with the renewal of anti-Semitism in the world, I said I have to do something with it. I have to show the people what it was, what was what they did during the war. And I found an institution here in Berlin, where I am right now, that makes study, and they write and they publish about anti-Semitism, and they are Germans and very dedicated to what they do. And I'm very happy to see what they are doing with my collection. And we will make a lot of exhibitions and writing books and doing films and doing everything to try to show the world what was really anti-Semitism. And I think my collection is a proof against all these negationists, these people who said that Holocaust didn't exist. And that and you know that today half of the children, the youth, don't even know what happened during the war. They don't even know the Shoah existed. So the goal of my collection is to educate and to teach people what it was.
And I should say, Arthur, because there are more than 10,000 items in your collection, obviously it's very difficult, impossible for us to show all of them. And what I want to emphasize is the geographical range and the historical range in your collection. I think the earliest pieces go back to the 16th century, but we focused mainly in our image selection today on Europe, because the oldest anti-Semitic images come from Europe. But we've had a few questions about anti-Semitism in the Arab and Muslim worlds, visual anti-Semitism in the Arab and Muslim worlds.
Yeah, so I have some Arab and Muslim anti-Semitism, but they are more concentrated on Gaza. They are showing that that the Israeli are killing the Gazawi, the Gaza people, and that they kill them, and they conquer them, and they want to put them in the sea. So it's more concentrated on Gaza. It's not so much on anti-Semitism, but they base themselves. They took images from the classical anti-Semitic images, and they transform them in the Arab countries.
So just a couple more questions, Arthur, before we finish here today, and this has really been a fascinating and enlightening discussion. I can't let you go without pointing out that you had a role in the recently broadcast Netflix series Rough Diamonds, which is set in the diamond district of Antwerp, and which features Jewish characters as the main characters. And for those of you wondering what Arthur's role was, Arthur was the Yiddish language coach, and was telling me earlier that he was schooling a number of non-Jewish Belgian actors in the Yiddish language. But I think the reason I raised that, Arthur, is of course Rough Diamonds shows us Jews who are very visibly Jewish, Haredi Jews with peot, with black hats, with tzitzit, lots of scenes in synagogues, lots of scenes at Shabbat and festival dinners. So in many ways, the opportunity was there for visual anti-Semitism to manifest in this particular series. How was it for you working on that series?
Well, I love to work it because I'm a Yiddishist. I speak fluently Yiddish. I translate Yiddish to French. I'm very interested in the revival of the Yiddish language, and it's a very sad thing that the Nazis killed more than the half of the Jewish people, the Yiddish-speaking people. So, but I enjoyed working with them. You have to know that the director of this film is the ones that did Fauda. It's the same crew, and they couldn't ask Haredi people to play in the film. The only Jewish person in this film is the father image, and the mother, it's Dudu Fisher, who is a singer and comedian in Israel. And the rest, they took Flemish actors that never spoke, even heard how they speak Yiddish. The main actor, they interviewed him, he said, I'm living in Antwerp 40 years, and I never even approached the Jewish people. And it's so interesting to hear their language. So I took these people that never spoke Yiddish in their life, and I started to teach them. And I gave them the right accent. And also I told them how to speak Yiddish, because speaking Yiddish is not only the language. You see, my hands are moving when I speak, and my body is moving when I speak. So a Jew has a different way of expressing himself than a non-Jew. And so I taught them how to speak, and you will see in the film. But if you see the film, you have to look at the original version, Flemish Yiddish, not the English version, because the English version is English. But if you see Flemish and Yiddish, you read the subtitles, you will understand the film. And it's very interesting to see how non-Jews can play the part of a Jew, that people come and say it's not possible that these are not Jews. They speak like Jews. They do everything. And at the end of my teaching, I saw 4 of them sitting on the table and having a discussion in Yiddish. So it was very, very funny, and very also for me nice to see my pupils speaking the language.
Well, and nice as well that you were able to have a positive experience, because I can imagine, and I think a lot of people watching here and listening to you can imagine, that it was pretty traumatic collecting these images over the years. You had to look at some pretty disturbing and revolting.
Yeah, but I think for me it was a healing way. I have to tell my youth was very difficult. We were very poor, and I didn't like the idea to go to a psychiatrist. So I tried to heal myself, and I think this being in contact with all these horrors helped me to survive and to be what I am today.
Well, Arthur, we're very grateful that you are who you are today. Your work is incredibly important, and we thank you for giving us your time and your insight and the benefit of your experience here today.
And thank you for your interview. It was very interesting to exchange with you. You have a good way of asking questions.
Thank you. Well, you have to keep up the mutual compliments. You have also a great way of answering them, Arthur. So thank you. Those of you, again, those of you who joined as the audience today, thank you so much for giving us your time. As I said earlier, do stay in touch with us. And if you want to talk about opportunities to support the Algemeiner, drop us an email at donate@theaj.com. That's donate@theaj.com. Okay, so again, thank all of you. Thank you, Arthur. Thank all of you for attending. I also want to thank the behind-the-scenes team in Berlin. Carl, the director of the collection, who has been really a great help to me in writing that piece. Stefan, your son, Arthur, and of course our very own Jason Pressberg, who traveled to Berlin today specifically to be at this meeting. So thanks to all of you. Everybody have a great week. Do stay in touch. All the best.
Thank you.